A quick look at today's starter code. We have a new Git repository, and that's because we're building the front end now. So lessons 1 through 4, the repository for those lessons has the backend code that has Node.js, Express, and MongoDB. That's the REST API. Now we're talking full stack. So not only do we have the backend, but we also have the front end, and that is built with React. And what you see in the package JSON is that I have named this lesson 05 with a dash front end. Now today we'll only have front end code, but if we ever have a lesson that has back end and front end, I will make sure to note on each directory which is the front end and which is the back end. Now you can see I've already started a React app with npx create React app, and I've removed all of the things we don't usually use. So the extra dependencies are gone. You'll also see in the source folder the extra files are removed, and I'm back with an index.js and an app.js, and I have an index.css. Now I have supplied some CSS already. This is not a tutorial on CSS. You can apply what you want to, or you can use mine, but I'm really focused on the structure of the MERN stack and building the logic throughout, and today we'll be focused on React. Other than that, I've also supplied an image folder. We only have one image, and it's a background image. You can see that right here. Somebody's working on some technology, and that's just what we'll use for Dandy's repair shop as the background. I've also supplied this same folder inside of the public directory, so there's no issue with you linking to it from the CSS, which is where I do that, and I only apply that background to the body element, which is not something we access through React normally anyway. So that should handle that. Now let's take a look at the user stories that we have previously looked at a few times, and these are the notes that I took from Dandy, our stakeholder, the owner of the repair shop that we're building this project for. Now we haven't completed any yet because we've only completed the back end, so we cannot fully say that any of these goals are met. However, today we should be able to complete a couple of these goals, just some basic ones like add a public facing page with basic contact info. We should also be able to provide a welcome page after the login. Now we could say that is complete, or we could wait until we complete the login portion. We're first building this MERN stack with full access and just making sure everything works the way we want it to before we apply the user roles and that authentication and authorization. We'll do that after we get everything else working. Let's head back to the package JSON, and we have several decisions to make today. I'm going to open up a terminal window and we'll get ready to install a package, but first let me discuss these decisions. We need to talk about the state management of the app, the file structure, and the routing structure as we begin to create this application. Those are things you need to decide early on. Even though we won't apply the state management today, we're going to use Redux and RTK query for this application. I've had many requests for that. It's not a huge application, but it is one that will be used for business purposes, and I think it will allow this application to grow if Dandy comes back to us and wants us to keep adding features to it. The other thing we'll do is apply the Redux file structure that you have seen in my previous Redux tutorials, and that's also what's in their documentation with their examples, and so it will be based on features. And now the routing structure. We're going to use React Router. So let's go ahead and install that dependency with just by npm I and then react-router-dom and press enter. It should add fairly quickly. I'll drag this down so we can see it in our dependencies, and there it is. Let's close the terminal window and go to index.js. Here we need to go ahead and remove this report web vitals that I forgot to remove before, but other than that we can go ahead and import what we need from React Router DOM. So we will import, and we need browser router, we also need routes, and we also need route. Now that we have those, let's go ahead and delete this web vitals part down here as well. And then inside of the root.render, we can start to apply what we have imported. So I'm going to delete the app component for now and just start with browser router. And after we add that, you can see I automatically get the closing part of that tag. And then inside of the browser router, I'm going to press tab to come over, and then I need to use routes. And then inside of the routes, I'm going to put a specific route. I'm going to assign the path to a slash and an asterisk, which will allow us to have nested routes. And then I'm going to set the element, and here is where we bring our app component back. Close out the app there, and then we need to go ahead and close out the route tag itself. So you can see we have browser router, nested within that we have routes, and then we apply a specific route that will allow nested routes as we move on to the app.js. So we can save here as we are now finished with the index.js, and we go to the app.js. In the app.js, we can remove these imports as they were the default from Create React App, and we can really remove everything here inside of the return as well. So just inside of the div with the class name app, we'll remove all of that. Let's start at the top of the file now, and we will import routes and route once again, and both of those will come from React Router DOM. Now let's leave this as is for a moment, and let's create inside of the source directory a new directory called components. And inside of this components directory, let's create a new file, and I'll name this layout.js. Now I'm going to import outlet from React Router DOM. And after we get that imported, we can go ahead and just type RAFCE, at least if you have React ES7 snippets extension like I do, and press tab. If not, you'll need to type that out. But once you have the basic layout here, we can remove everything after the return, and then we can just provide outlet. So all this does is render the children of the outlet component, and we're going to make this our parent component. The nice thing about having the layout component here is if we decide to add a banner that would go across the entire application throughout, or a footer or anything like that that we would want to show on both the public and the private pages, I mean on everything that shows in the application, we could do it here. So this gives us kind of one parent where we can add extra things if we need to. So let's go ahead and save our layout.js. Now let's go back to the app.js, and we'll start by importing the layout that we created. So layout, and that comes from the components layout. After that, inside of the return, let's go ahead and put in a routes. And then inside of that, we'll put in a specific route, and this will be the parent of everything else essentially that we have underneath it. So here we'll just have the root, and then we'll say element equals, and then we'll put in our layout. But we will not close this out like you saw in the index. We will make this a route with a closing route tag, and now we can put everything else inside of this, and the layout will be the parent. Now let's go back to the components directory, and we'll create another file there, and I'm just going to name this public. This will be our public facing page for Dan D's Repair Shop, and inside of this we're going to need a link from React Router. So we'll import that from React Router DOM. And after that, let's once again use our RAFCE shortcut and create a public function. I'm just going to highlight everything here inside of the component, and I'm going to paste in a basic web page essentially here. You can see I'm creating a content variable, and then I'm returning that content with the functional component. And you can see it's inside of a section with the class name public. You'll want that to match up to my CSS if you're using my CSS. And then inside of this section, we have a full structure, a header, a main element, and a footer. You can see the footer is going to link to a login page. After that, the main section here, the main element, has all of the information about Dan D's Repairs, and the header has a welcome. Now, of course, you'll want these class names to match my CSS. I'm using a BEM naming convention for some of these, or if it's a utility class like NoWrap, it just has its own name there. So just note that if you're using mine, but feel free to create your own as well. No problem with that, as this does not really apply to the logic of the rest of the stack, but it does meet one of our user stories. So that's important. We can come back to the app.js now, and we can import this. So import public, and that's going to come from the components. and then a public. And once we have that, we can put it inside of this route. So this is going to be another route, and then we can assign it a value as well. And this value is going to be index. And that means when you come to this root path, it's not showing a layout. Layout just renders the children. So this will be the default component that it shows. So here we'll say element equals, and we'll provide the public component that we created. Now let's go ahead and close this route out. Now after this, we also noticed public links to a login component. So let's save the app.js, go back and create a quick login component. We're not going to handle all of the login logic today and all of those roles and authorization and things like that. But in this hierarchy, this will at least let us create this page and import it into the app.js. So I'll use my ES7 shortcut again to create that functional component. Once we have the login here, I'm only going to change the div to an H1, just my preference again, and save that. Now let's go back to the app.js, make that import as well. So import login, that comes from components login, and then we can use it right under our public here. So we'll have route. This will not be the index though, so we'll just say path equals login, and then we have to provide the element, so that's going to equal that login component here, and let's close this one out as well. Now let's create another component, and I'm going to call this one dash layout. So this will be part of the dash after a user has logged in. So one of Dan's employees or Dan himself will have logged in, and then we'll have our dash layout. So I'll use RAFCE once again to create a quick functional component, and now we can make some changes. Let's start with an import at the top, and we're going to import outlet once again from React Router DOM. And once we have that imported, then inside of the dash layout, we're going to set some things a little differently. I'm going to use a fragment because I know I'm going to need it to nest some things inside. And once I've done that, I'm going to start with a div, and this div is going to have a class name. So I'll come back and add class name and set this equal to dash container. And then inside of this dash container, we can provide the outlet. So now we have wrapped this in a div, so we can apply different styles to our area that will be required to have a login to. I guess our protected area, you could say, we could apply different styles as we now have that in a container, and all of the children will be within that. We're also going to use a dash header and a dash footer, but we haven't created those yet. So let's start with the dash header, and I'll create that component over here as well, dash header.js. And now I'll use RAFCE to quickly get that functional component again. And at the top, we're going to need to import in a link here. So let's import link, and that once comes from React Router DOM. And after we have the link, let's go ahead and add the body here to the component. I'll once again highlight this return and replace it, and we can go over this. It's fairly simple content here. We have a header as the container. Inside of this, we have a div with the class name dash header 2_ container, and then we have a link to dash notes. This is linking the H1 that we see here that says tech notes, which is the name of the application. And then we have a nav element that we know we will fill later with navigation buttons, but we're not adding those right now. That is the basic structure of our dash header, so we can save that file. And now let's once again go back, not to the app.js, I guess, but back to the dash layout. And here we'll import the dash header. There it is in my list. And once we have that, we can put it right here inside of the JSX. So we say dash header and just close it out there. Now this is an example, as I mentioned with the previous layout, this has the children here. So now the dash header will be above every page on the protected part of our site. So this is the layout component for that protected part of the site. And now we'll be able to add a dash footer down here too that we won't see on the public page, but once we make it to the dash part of the page, which is the protected part, we'll begin to see that header and the footer after we create it. Before we create the dash footer, let's go back to the package JSON as we need to add a few dependencies for Font Awesome. So I'm just going to press Control backtick to open up the terminal window, and then I'm going to type npm I, and I'm going to paste in the first part, which is at Fort Awesome, not Font Awesome, but Fort Awesome, and then it is Font Awesome dash svg dash core is the first dependency, but we have two others that I'll just put all on this same line. It will once again start with at Fort Awesome, and then it is free dash solid dash svg dash icons, and then finally one more that starts with at Fort Awesome, and it will be react dash font awesome. With those three all on the same line, I'll press enter and they should install into our dependencies, and then we'll be able to use Font Awesome components inside of our project. And now you can see all three of these listed up here. If you didn't catch that when I listed them out on the line below, pause and install those if you need to, and then come back to the video. I'm going to close the terminal window, and back in the components directory, I am going to create the dash footer component. So we'll start with dash footer.js, press enter, RAFCE for a functional component, but we've got some more work to do inside of this component. So let's start out with the basics. Inside of the component, I'm going to define my content. I'm going to set that equal to a footer element, and then inside of the footer element, I guess I should apply the class name while I'm here. So class name is going to equal dash dash footer, and then inside of this element, our user stories said they wanted to see the current user and status, and I think the footer would be a good place to have this available throughout the entire application. So I'll just put a paragraph here that has current user, and when we start working with state, we'll be able to bring in that user. And then I'm also going to put another paragraph here that has status, and the same, we'll be able to bring in the current status once we start working with the state as well. Now there's some other things we want to add to this footer though. So now let's go to the top. Oh, we're not returning it yet. I need to put the return of the content here. So we'll just get rid of that and say content. Now let's go to the top and we'll say import, and we're going to bring in Font Awesome icon. There you can see that full import. After that, we're going to import FA house from, well, it's Fort Awesome / free solid SVG icons. And once we've imported that, we need a couple of things from React Router too. We'll say import use navigate, and we'll also say use location. Those will come from React Router DOM. With those imports all in place, we can now start adding some to our component. I'm going to start with const navigate, set that equal to use navigate from React Router, and then I'm also going to destructure path name from our use location hook that we imported. Now that I have those values, I'm going to create a simple function here called onGoHomeClicked. Let's set this equal to an anonymous function, and then it will be navigate / and then we'll have our dash. After this function, let's create the button that's going to use it. I'm going to start with let, and I'll say go home button, and it's just going to equal null. But now we can have an if statement, and we'll say if path name that we've destructured above from the location is not equal to /dash, then we'll do something else with the button instead of having the value be null. So we'll say go home button. Let's set this equal to a button. Notice the parentheses since I'm breaking this out onto separate lines. And now with this button on separate lines, I'll put the class name, and I'm going to set this equal to a couple of classes. So I've got a dash footer, 2 underscores button, and I've also got another class that is icon button. After that, we'll give it a title, and this is just going to equal home. Of course, the title value always shows up when you mouse over a button. And then on click will be equal to that function we created, on go home clicked. And after that, we can close out our button here. Now we can give a value that's going to be on the button, and here instead of a word, we're going to use our font awesome icon, and then we can set the icon equal to the FA house that we imported. And then we can go ahead and close out our button. And I'm getting all the red lines because I closed out the button early. Out of habit, I put the slash there. So there we're good now that I removed that slash, and we've created our button. And now the only thing that remains is just to put the button inside of the footer. So we'll put it inside of curly braces and have our go home button. Now this will only appear if we're not at the root page of Dash. So we don't want the home button to appear there because we will already essentially be home if we're a logged in user, but we want it to appear on all other pages. We'll have a little home icon in the footer. Let's take a quick look at app.js, and it doesn't look like we have imported in our Dash layout component yet. So let's do that. We'll have our Dash layout, and that comes from components, and then we'll find our Dash layout. There it is. Now remember, with the Dash layout, it imports the header and the footer. So we still need to import the Dash footer over here. And once we've imported that, we can use it inside of the Dash layout. So all that the app.js needs is the Dash layout component because it pulls in the header and the footer here. So now back at the app.js, we see we've imported Dash layout, but we still need to use it. Now, this will be really where the protected routes begin, but we haven't applied that protection yet, and that's okay. So here we actually need route first. We'll say route path is going to equal Dash, and then we'll set the element equal to Dash layout. And now we won't close this. It will actually wrap around the other components that are protected inside of this route. I had previously mentioned folder and file structure and said we were going to use what we've seen in my Redux course and that we also see in the Redux Toolkit docs. We're going to base this on features. So let's go ahead and create a features directory that's going to be inside of the source directory as well. So we'll have features, and now inside of this features directory, let's create another one named auth. And now that I'm thinking about it, inside of this components directory, we could have brought the login inside of auth because it's related to that feature. So once we do that and we moved it over, you can see it was instantly changed in my app.js file, and I will save that change. If it's not in yours, you'll need to change where you have imported the login component from. But so we've put that inside of the auth directory. Now let's go ahead and create our welcome page because we'll already need to be logged in there as well, and it will use some of that information. So I'm relating that back to a protected directory or a protected route. So I'm going to put it inside of auth. Now, my way isn't the only way of doing this. So if you want to create a different directory, if it makes sense to you in another way, there's nothing wrong with that. You're just trying to use some logical hierarchy here. So now with this welcome component, I'm once again going to create, oh, and I don't have a dot there between the welcome.js, so this would not be a good thing right now. Let's rename this. It didn't recognize what type of file it was. Welcome.js. Now we're ready. Type RAFCE, and we get that functional component. At the top of this component, we once again need our link from React Router DOM. So I will return, come down one, and import in link from React Router DOM. And after I get that imported, we're ready to put something inside of the component. I'm going to highlight and paste and review with you. I'll press Alt-Z to get this code to wrap. So we're importing link from React Router DOM. We get to our component, and I'm creating a new date, first of all. And then I am formatting that date where it says today. So I'm creating a today variable, and I'm using this new international .datetime format. Now, you may be in another location. We know Dan D is in the US. He's our stakeholder, so that's what we're setting here. But if you want to set something for your location, you can do that as well. And then we're putting in the object with the formatting that this datetime format requires. So it says date style is full, time style is long, and then we're formatting the date right here. So you can see all of that, and we'll get this nice format for the date that we want to display. That's actually in one of our user stories where it talks about the login page, and we're giving the date. We're also supposed to give some user information that we will do in the future. But we're able to pull in this today variable down here inside of our content where we create this section. So here is the today variable pulled in with that format. Right now we'll just have a nice welcome message, and then we'll have links to /notes, which will be our tech notes, and to the user settings. Now, the user settings will not be available to all users in the future. We'll apply some roles to whether that is visible or not, but right now we just want to make sure it works. So we've created that section, and then we return the content, and that is our welcome page overall, our welcome component. So we can save that and now import it into the JS or our app.js. We'll say import welcome, and that comes from features auth welcome. I'm going to delete this semicolon as I'm trying not to use as many of those as I have in the past, as they're not really required. And now inside of our dash layout, this will be a route that's nested within. So I'll just give a little space, and then we'll have a route, and this will be the index route for the dash path. So when we go to dash and it renders the children, it will look for this index if you just go to the dash right here. So then we'll say element, we'll set this equal to welcome, and we'll close that out, and then we can go ahead and close out this route. So you can see, as I mentioned before, we do have a nested hierarchy here. We start out with the index, essentially the index for the full page or the full site, and that goes to the public. But then after a login, we essentially have an index for the protected routes as well, and that is our dash layout. You go to the dash path though, and it renders the children, and the actual index value that will show is our welcome component. So now, as you noted, inside of the welcome component, there was a link to the notes and a link to the user settings. Those are our other main features of this application. So let's create directories for both of those. We'll have a notes directory, and then inside of features, we will also have a users directory. Okay, I'm going to select the notes directory first, and inside of that I'm going to create a new component called noteslist.js, and then RAFCE to create that functional component. And the only thing I'm going to change here right now is the div to an H1 and press save. Now I'll do the same thing for users. So we're creating these components, we're not putting the logic in them yet, but they are placeholders for the future. We'll have users list.js, RAFCE for that functional component, and we'll once again change the div to an H1 and save. And now if we go back to app.js, we can finish out the hierarchy of our application. So here, we're going to have another route, but I guess we need to import these first as well. So let's go ahead and import in our notes list from features, notes, notes list, and then we'll do the same for users list, and that's from features, users, users list. And then we can set up the routing here. Now it's inside of the dash layout, our protected parent here, and then we'll put in our route. We'll set this path equal to notes. And then let's just close the route and get that closing tag right there, because we don't have to put the element right there. We're going to have several things inside of this notes route. And remember, we're already inside of the dash route. So if we went to this, it would be whatever our domain is /dash/notes to get to our notes list. And we'll make this the index of this path. So we will then say route index and set the element equal to our notes list component. And then we can close that out right here, as we won't nest other things inside of the notes list, but we may eventually put other things in the notes path, such as the edit note component or the new note component. Now we can essentially highlight this, press Shift Alt and the down arrow, and then I'm going to select notes and Control D to select the other notes and switch this to users. So now I have path users, and we're rendering as the index of this path the users list. And if the nested routes start to get confusing, you can leave yourself a note inside of curly braces, such as a comment here, and we can say end dash, which was our dash layout. And now that might help you see things a little clearly when you get to the bottom and you're just seeing these closing routes here. So overall, the repair notes application that we've created can see the routing structure inside of the app.js component. We've got two public routes. One is just the root itself that goes to the public component. The other goes to the login page. After that, we are going to protect these following routes in the future. We have not yet, and that's okay. But if we go to /dash, we should see the welcome component. If we go to /dash/notes, we should see the notes list component, and then /dash/users, we should see the users list components. We've also created our basic file structure here, where we have some components for the overall, the dash area, and the public inside of components. If you want to create a separate directory for just those dash components, you could. I did not. But then we also have a features directory, and we're going to have three primary features for this. We're going to have the auth directory, the notes directory, and the users. So we're organizing these logically by which they apply to. So in the future, of course, the notes directory would hold the note edit component, it would hold the new note component, and it has the notes list. Similar for users, and then other things associated with the auth, the authorization, the roles that we have, and things like that will be inside of this auth directory here. So it should make it fairly easy to find. But again, this is not the only way to do it, but it's the way that I'm doing it. And the examples you see in my Redux course will follow that pattern as well. Right now, we should be able to open up a terminal window, type npm start, and at least see what we've got so far and make sure everything is working correctly. So here we've got our full page for Welcome to Dan D Repairs. We've got the basic information that Dan wanted for his basic web page at the beginning. Now our link should work to the employee login, and when we click it, it does. We just have our login heading. We're not ready for the rest. So let's change this path to dash and see what we get. Here we've got our tech notes page. It's got our full date format and the welcome. It's got a link to the notes and a link to the user settings. Now we also see our header, and we see our footer that will have the current user and status. Notice there is no home icon, but if we go to the tech notes, which is the notes list, now we see a home icon that's available here. Our tech notes should also link, the word tech notes should link back to the home page as well. And our footer still remains at the bottom. So let's click Tech Notes here to check that out. And it looks like maybe I linked Tech Notes back to Notes. We'll check that in a second. The home does link back to the home page. Let's check the users list. Everything looks the same here. So we go back, and that's working. So now let's just check that code for the one component that I said, the header. And that would be here inside of the components directory. We have our dash header, and let's see where we're linking to. And yes, it is at /dash/notes. Let's just delete the notes off of there, as we have made the welcome, the home page. That change went ahead and registered, and we can bring this back. And actually, you can see this now in a smaller screen that it still looks just fine. Let's go back to the tech notes. And now if we click tech notes at the top, it links back just like our home icon does at the bottom on both pages. We have the basic layout and structure for our React application, and in the next tutorial, we'll be managing state with Redux and applying the API layer with RT